They painted parking lines on my driveway while I was at work. Not near it, not accidentally over the line. On it, bright yellow stripes, numbered stalls, like I'd suddenly opened a public garage without knowing it. And by the time I got home that Friday evening, 3 cars were parked 10 feet from my shop door, like they'd been invited. I stood there for a good 30 seconds just staring at it. Engine still running, hands on the steering wheel, trying to decide if I was tired or losing my mind. Let me back up a little. My name's Caleb Turner. I live on the edge of a small town outside Cedar Ridge, Ohio, in a house my dad helped me build 15 years ago. It's not fancy. It's a square, practical place with a detached garage and a metal workshop where I fix small engines and do custom wood projects on the side. The driveway is wide concrete, poured thick, runs along the side of the property from the main road all the way back to my shop. It was built before the townhouse development next door even existed. Before the HOA, before the matching mailboxes and the newsletter emails and the seasonal wreath rules. That driveway is mine. Survey pins in the corners. Deed recorded at the county. Property taxes paid every single year without fail. I know because I complain about them every April. About 5 years ago, the empty lot next to me was sold to a developer. Up went 12 narrow town homes, all identical shades of beige and gray, tidy little porches, 2-car garages that barely fit a sedan and a lawnmower. They formed an HOA almost immediately. At first, it didn't affect me. I wasn't part of it. My property was older, standalone, no shared utilities, no shared roads, clean line on the plat map. But over time, parking became their problem. You could see it building month by month. Extra cars lining their internal street. Guests squeezing in sideways. Trash day looking like a dealership overflow lot. I'd hear snippets when I was out front mowing. Someone arguing about overflow parking. Someone else saying the board needed to do something. Still, none of that had anything to do with me. Or at least I thought so. So that Friday when I turned into my driveway and saw fresh paint reflecting in the headlights, my first thought was that a contractor had messed up the address. Maybe they meant to stripe their private street and got turned around. But then I noticed the numbers. Clean white stencils inside the yellow boxes. 789 and right near my garage door in crisp block letters. Resident parking only. I actually laughed. Just a short disbelieving sound. Like that's bold. I parked on the grass because there wasn't room to get through without squeezing past the cars. And even then, one SUV was angled enough that I couldn't fully open my driver's door. I got out and walked the length of the driveway. Crouched down near the edge where the concrete meets the grass. Brushed dirt away from the survey pin that's been there since 2008. Still there. Still metal, still mine. One of the town homeowners, a guy named Trent Hollis, stepped out onto his porch as I was looking at it. "Hey Caleb," he called, casual as could be. "Looks good, right?" Finally some order. I stood up slowly. Order, yeah. The board had it striped. We needed this space. It was just sitting here. Just sitting here. I walked closer to the fence line between our properties. "Trent, this is my driveway." He gave that half shrug people give when they don't want conflict, but also don't want to give up ground. Well, the board said it's basically an extension of the shared access. I mean, it runs along our block. Runs along doesn't mean belongs to, I said. He held up his hands like he wasn't the decision maker. Take it up with Marcus. Marcus Dane, HOA president, mid-40s, finance job, always in polo shirts with embroidered logos. The kind of guy who says per the bylaws in normal conversation. I didn't knock on doors that night. I went inside, poured a glass of water, and sat at my kitchen table staring out the window at headlights turning into my driveway like it was a public lot. I told myself there had to be some misunderstanding. Maybe the contractor assumed. Maybe the board didn't realize the boundary. So I called Marcus. He answered on the second ring. "Caleb, what's up?" "What's up?" I repeated, trying to keep my voice level. "Is that there are parking lines on my driveway?" A pause. Papers shuffling on his end. "Right. So the board reviewed the layout of the block and determined that section appeared to be unused excess pavement. We're optimizing shared space for residents and used excess pavement." "Marcus," I said slowly, "that pavement leads to my workshop." "Well, sure, but you don't use the full width, and the residents are experiencing the shortage. It's for the greater good." I actually felt heat rise in my face at that. "Did anyone check the property survey?" "We looked at the general map." "The general map," I repeated. "Not the deed." He exhaled like I was being difficult. "If you have documentation, email it over. We'll review at the next board meeting." The next board meeting 2 weeks away. Meanwhile, 3 cars were parked where I backed trailers in. After I hung up, I pulled the folder from my office cabinet. Survey from 2008, Plat Map County Parcel printout. I scanned it all and sent it with a short email highlighted in red. "My property line. Please advise immediate removal." His reply came an hour later. "We will discuss this formally. In the meantime, please be patient as we work toward a community solution." Community solution. That night, I didn't sleep well. Every time headlights swung across my bedroom ceiling, I felt this low hum of something building inside me. Not just anger, something heavier. It wasn't about the paint. Not really. It was about the assumption that if enough people needed something, they could just take it. That bright yellow lines could blur a boundary that had been legally set for years. Saturday morning, I walked outside with coffee in my hand and stopped cold. A silver sedan was parked crossways near the entrance, blocking the entire path to the road. Not just inconvenient, impassable. I stood there staring at it, steam rising from the cup in my hand. And that was the moment something shifted from confusion to clarity. They didn't think it was mine. They thought if they acted like it wasn't, eventually it wouldn't be. And that was when I decided I wasn't waiting for the next board meeting. I set the coffee down on the hood of my truck and just stood there, looking at that silver sedan like it had personally insulted me. It was parked sideways across the mouth of my driveway, nose practically kissing the main road, rear end blocking the only way in or out. I had a delivery scheduled that afternoon, a client picking up a custom walnut table from the shop, and there was no way I was getting a trailer through that mess. For a minute, I considered knocking on doors again, giving everyone the benefit of the doubt. Maybe it belonged to a guest. Maybe someone misunderstood the resident parking only stencil and thought it applied to the whole strip. But then I remembered Marcus's voice on the phone for the greater good. Be patient. No one had been patient with me. I walked up and down the row of townhomes knocking. A woman in slippers cracked her door and squinted at me. "Morning," I said. "Any chance the silver Camry blocking my driveway is yours?" She frowned. "Oh, that's not your driveway anymore, is it?" I thought the HOA designated it. Designated it. "It's still mine," I said evenly. "And right now it's blocked." She shook her head. "Not mine." Door closed. 2 houses down. A college-aged kid with messy hair answered. "You know whose car that is?" I asked. He leaned out, looked toward the driveway. "Pretty sure it's fine. They striped it yesterday." I felt my jaw tighten. "Striping it doesn't make it public." He shrugged, already retreating. "Talk to the board man." By the time I got back to my driveway, the coffee was cold, and whatever patience I'd been clinging to was gone with it. I went inside, grabbed the folder with my deed and survey, and dialed the towing company I'd used a couple times for abandoned vehicles behind my shop. Ridgeway Towing. Local. No nonsense. A growly voice answered. "Ridgeway. Hey, this is Caleb Turner over on Ashford Lane. I've got unauthorized vehicles on private property blocking access. I need them removed. A pause. You the property owner? Yes, sir. You got documentation? Got it in my hand. Text me the address. We'll send 2 trucks. 2 trucks. When I hung up, my heart was pounding harder than I expected. Not from fear, exactly, more from the weight of the decision. Once a tow truck shows up, it's not theoretical anymore. It's real. It costs someone money. It embarrasses them. It escalates. But then I looked at that silver sedan again and thought about the words and used excess pavement. Escalation had already happened. I was just responding. Before the trucks arrived, I drove to the hardware store and bought 2 metal signs. Private property. Unauthorized vehicles will be towed at owner's expense. I mounted one at the entrance near the road and another halfway down the driveway near the shop. Big enough to read from a car window. No ambiguity. When I pulled back in, the first tow truck was already there, idling like a patient animal. The driver, a broad-shouldered guy named Hank I recognized, climbed out and nodded at me. Morning, Caleb. Show me what we're dealing with. I handed him copies of the deed and survey. He glanced over them, then at the survey pin embedded in the concrete edge. This line here, he asked. That's the boundary, he grunted. All right then. There's something oddly cinematic about a tow truck hooking up a car. The hydraulic whine, the clink of chains, the way the front end lifts just slightly before the whole thing settles into submission. The silver sedan's alarm started blaring halfway through, echoing off the town homes like a siren, announcing consequences. Doors started opening. Trent came out first, barefoot, phone in hand. What the hell is going on? I didn't raise my voice. Private property. It's being cleared. You can't just tow residents' cars. They can't just park on my land. The second truck rolled in and started hooking a black SUV parked near my garage door. By then, 3 more neighbors were gathered at the edge of the grass, whispering, filming, shaking their heads like I just committed a felony. Trent dialed someone. I knew who. Marcus' SUV pulled up 20 minutes later, stopping halfway into the road because there was nowhere else to park now. He stepped out, sunglasses on, jaw tight. This is unnecessary, he said as he walked toward me. What's unnecessary? I replied, is painting my driveway without permission. We believed it was shared access. You believed wrong. Hank finished securing the sedan and climbed back into his truck. The vehicle lifted fully off the ground this time, back wheels dangling, and began to roll away. The sound of the alarm faded down the street. Marcus gestured at the second tow in progress. This is aggressive, Caleb. Aggressive was doing work on property you don't own. He pulled off his sunglasses. We're trying to solve a parking shortage. The residents are frustrated. We have elderly homeowners who can't find spots near their units. And your solution, I said, was to take from the one house that isn't in your HOA. He didn't answer that. Instead, he tried a different angle. Even if the survey says it's yours, this is about being part of a community. I let out a short laugh. Community usually involves asking. For a second, we just stood there. The grinder marks from the fresh paint were still visible. The bright yellow lines looked almost ridiculous now, like props from a play that had ended abruptly. The second SUV was lifted and hauled away. 4 cars total by the time it was done. A small crowd had formed, murmuring, phones out. I could feel the weight of their stares, the unspoken judgment. To them, I wasn't defending property rights. I was the guy who cost their neighbor a towing fee on a Saturday morning. Marcus stepped closer, lowering his voice. This will be discussed at the next meeting. Good, I said. Bring the deed. He stared at me a long moment, then turned and walked back to his SUV. When the trucks left, the driveway was quiet again, empty. Mine. I stood there longer than I needed to. Just breathing, feeling the adrenaline drain out of my system. It wasn't victory exactly, more like reclaiming something that should never have been questioned. By Monday morning, my inbox was full. Subject lines like uncalled for and legal action and community hostility. Some from residents, some from Marcus himself, written in that tight formal tone people use when they're trying to sound authoritative. One email read, "You are creating unnecessary division." I replied with attachments, photos of the blocked access, a time-stamped image of the survey pin, a copy of the county parcel map, and a formal notice I drafted stating that the striping was unauthorized, that it constituted trespass, and that I expected immediate removal and reimbursement for surface restoration. I didn't threaten. I didn't insult. I just laid out facts. 2 days later, a different truck showed up. Not a tow truck this time. A contractor van with a concrete grinder in the back. I watched from my workshop doorway as the same crew that had painted those bright yellow lines returned, looking considerably less confident. They didn't make eye contact, just unloaded the grinder and got to work. The sound was harsh, metallic, a high-pitched scrape as the yellow paint disappeared in a cloud of fine gray dust. It took hours. The driveway looked scarred afterward, faint shadows where the lines had been, but the message was gone. Marcus didn't come by that day. Instead, an email went out to the HOA residents. After further review of property documentation, the board has determined that the paved area adjacent to Lot 14 is privately owned and not designated for community parking. Not designated like it had ever been up for designation in the first place. That should have been the end of it. Lines gone, cars gone, clarification sent. But standing there watching the grinder chew away at the paint, I realized something had shifted between me and the people next door. Not just a boundary on a map, but a perception. They had tested it, and I had pushed back. After the grinding was done and the crew packed up, the driveway looked tired. That's the only way I can describe it. The bright yellow arrogance was gone. But in its place were faint shadows, ghost lines etched into the concrete like a memory that didn't want to fade. I stood there that evening with a hose, washing away the dust, watching gray water run toward the street. And I kept thinking how strange it was that something as simple as paint could turn neighbors into opponents. For a few days, things were quiet. No cars parked there. No notes on my door. No more community solution emails. I sealed the concrete where the grinder had scuffed it. Rolled on a protective coat to even out the surface. I replaced the temporary signs with sturdier ones bolted into the ground. I installed 2 motion cameras at either end of the driveway, angled just enough to capture license plates without pointing into anyone's windows. I wasn't trying to escalate. I was trying to remove ambiguity, but tension has a way of hanging in the air even after the event is over. The next Saturday, I ran into Trent at the mailbox cluster near the road. He hesitated before speaking. "Look," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "A lot of people are pretty upset about the towing." "I figured," I said. "Some folks got hit with like $300 in fees." I nodded. So did I for the concrete sealant, for the signs, for the survey copy. I had to pull. He shifted his weight. "It just feels harsh." I looked at him for a second, not angry, just tired. "You know what felt harsh?" I said, coming home to find my property rebranded without anyone knocking on my door. He didn't have much to say to that. And that's the part that stuck with me the most over the following weeks. Not the yelling, not even Marcus's tight-lipped glare at the grocery store. It was the casual assumption, the quiet math that went something like this. There are 12 of us and 1 of him. Therefore, the space should bend toward us. I started replaying my conversation with Marcus in my head, trying to understand his angle. From his perspective, he had residents complaining limited parking, Maybe elderly homeowners circling the block at night, maybe pressure building at meetings. He probably saw my wide empty driveway during business hours and thought it was wasteful. Untapped resource, a clean fix to an ugly problem. But instead of negotiating some kind of temporary arrangement, he chose to act first and justify later. And that's where it all went wrong. About a month after the grinding, I got a certified letter, not a lawsuit, not exactly an apology either. It was from the HOA's attorney, polite, carefully worded. It acknowledged my ownership, confirmed the board would not attempt to use the driveway again, and requested that I refrain from towing without first contacting the association in the future to preserve neighborhood harmony. I read that line twice. Refrain from towing, as if the towing had been the root issue. I didn't respond right away. I sat with it for a couple days, walked the driveway in the evenings, listened to the sounds of the town homes next door, kids playing, garage doors opening and closing, muffled music drifting over the fence. These weren't villains. They were people who wanted convenience, people who trusted a board to make decisions for them. But convenience doesn't rewrite deeds. Eventually, I drafted a simple reply. I stated that I would always prefer communication before escalation. I also stated that any future unauthorized use of my property would be handled in accordance with local law without additional notice. Clear, calm, final. Marcus and I didn't speak directly for several months after that. Then one afternoon in early fall, he showed up at my workshop while I was sanding a cabinet door. He knocked on the frame and waited until I pulled off my ear protection. "Got a minute?" he asked. I studied him for a second, then nodded. He stepped inside, looked around at the tools, the half-finished projects, the smell of sawdust hanging in the air. "I shouldn't have handled it the way I did," he said finally. It wasn't dramatic. No grand apology, just a sentence delivered without the armor he usually wore. "I was getting heat from everyone," he continued. "And I thought if I just fixed it quickly, people would calm down. I didn't think you'd react that strongly." I almost smiled at that. "You painted my driveway." He let out a breath. "Yeah." There was a long pause between us filled with the hum of the overhead lights. "I should have knocked on your door," he said. "Yeah," I replied. "You should have." That was about as close to closure as we got. The parking problem didn't magically disappear for them. I still see cars lining their internal street on weekends. But my driveway stays clear. The signs are still up. The cameras still blink softly at night. Every now and then, someone new moves into one of the town homes and tries to park halfway onto the concrete out of habit. The signs usually stop them. If not, a quick conversation does. I haven't had to call a tow truck since that weekend. But I think about it sometimes how thin the line is between community and control. How easily good intentions can slide into entitlement. It would have been so simple for me to let it go at first. To squeeze around the parked cars, to wait for the board meeting, to avoid being that guy. And maybe some people still think I am that guy, the stubborn neighbor, the one who wouldn't compromise. But here's the thing, compromise requires consent. It requires a conversation where both sides have a choice. What happened that Friday wasn't compromise. It was assumption painted in yellow. When I drive down my driveway now, tires humming over smooth concrete, I sometimes glance at the faint discoloration where the lines used to be. They're almost invisible unless you know where to look. A reminder more than a scar. Ownership isn't loud. It's not flashy. It doesn't come with stencil numbers and neat boxes. It's quieter than that. It's the survey pin in the dirt, the line on a plat map, the tax bill that shows up every year whether you're ready for it or not. And sometimes it's a tow truck on a Saturday morning. I'm curious what you would have done in my place. Would you have waited for the meeting, tried to negotiate shared use, or would you have called the trucks the moment your access was blocked? Was I defending what was mine, or did I escalate too fast? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I really want to hear where you land on this, because living next to people means navigating that blurry space between rights and relationships. And there's no HOA handbook in the world that perfectly defines that.